So before we start the video, I'd just like to point out that 90% of you aren't subscribed to my channel, which kind of hurts. So if you could press that subscribe button, it would really help me out. Thank you. Formula 1. It's a big sport. There's over 10 million people worldwide who watch 20 drivers for 10 teams battle it out in some of the fastest cars in the world, at some crazy locations. This provides an imperial ton of entertainment to the fans, and drivers build up some huge fan bases. Well, some more than others. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of talented racing drivers in the world, but there's only 20 spots in Formula 1, meaning the chances of you making it to Formula 1 as an F1 driver are not very likely. But you see, series like Formula 3 have 30 drivers, so that got me thinking, what if Formula 1 had 30 drivers? Sounding like the depressed soul I am, let's start with the negatives of a 30-car grid. First off being driver reputation. Formula 1 drivers are celebrities, and people like Lewis Hamilton are now household names. But if you added another 10 drivers to the grid, drivers would possibly become less well known, since there's more of them, so they're less uncommon. Now I'm not saying F1 drivers are Pokemon cards, but if there's more drivers, it may not seem so prestigious being in Formula 1 anymore, and there could be less hype behind becoming a driver. Obviously, it would still be a big thing being able to go to the club saying you're a Formula 1 driver, but we then have the fact of too many cars. If you've ever watched FIA F3 before, you've probably seen that it gets a bit hectic at some points, with there being just an endless train of cars going further and further down the track, making you watch it and think, how many cars can there possibly be? And there's also the problem of when it's on stream. This isn't exactly a huge problem, but in Formula 3, only 22 of the 30 drivers actually fit on the timing graphic. And since you can only have one camera view at once, there were 8 or 9 drivers last year who got less screen time than Danny Kvyat in Drive to Survive, meaning that it would be pretty easy to be practically completely ignored as a driver, which is sort of hooking on to the previous point. And here we have probably the biggest problem of why 30 cars on a grid couldn't work. Money. Money makes the world go round, and it powers the second Haas car too, but running a Formula 1 team costs over $150 million a year as it is right now. And if you add another car to the team's lineup, the cash required will begin to pile up, and it could probably mean that teams such as Williams and Haas couldn't compete anymore, which would be a shame, although that depends if you count them as competing now. But money is getting more and more important in motorsport, and the only real way to be able to have F1 teams continue with 3 cars would be to drastically reduce the performance. But I can tell you now, that would not be a positive decision among the fans.
Negatives of a 30-car grid may be Monaco. Could you imagine getting 30 2020 cars around the infamous Circuit de Monaco? It would be a stretch for sure. Also, I'm sure you remember qualifying around Monza in 2019? Imagine that, but with 10 more cars.
Of course, everything has negatives, as Rich Energy proved to us last year, but there are of course positives to F1 having 30 cars. Firstly being the racing. In the 2020 Formula 1 season, there were several races where practically nothing happened for an entire race. But if you then watch the support races at the same track, there was endless action. If there's 30 cars, that's a 10-car increase, which means that it's another 10 cars worth of racing and action added to races, meaning races could be a lot less boring, which could also attract new viewers to Formula 1. We then have a big problem in Formula 1 at the moment, which if I were to summarise it for you, I'd have 2 words. Calamilord. There's only 20 seats in Formula 1, and drivers often stay in F1 for years on end, much longer than it takes for people to progress through junior series, which means that it's often the case that some immense talents come through the door of finishing F2, and it's empty. There's no F1 seat for them. But if we had 30 cars, it would be easier to get an F1 seat, which would then be arguably better because we'd then see a lot less drivers miss out on F1 after Formula 2. There's then the factor of there just being change. People love it when things change in Formula 1, and adding an extra 10 cars would add plenty of change. And it would also make for a better silly season too, meaning that there'd be more Formula 1 action in the off-season, keeping the fans engaged.
A 30-car grid may be good due to the abundance of racing it could produce. Tracks that the system might shine on could be Silverstone, Spa, Suzuka and Kota, with a large number of overtaking opportunities. Also, there would clearly be enough space.
In my opinion, 30 cars in Formula 1 could be a big positive, since there could be more young talent, more racing, and overall more action. Although it could then result in many Nikita Mazepin clones, aka pay drivers. However, I don't really see 30 cars happening due to the money side, as it would cost a lot more to have 3 drivers. However, with the 2022 regulations, whenever they can be bothered to introduce them, F1 will be a more affordable sport, meaning that it could perhaps be possible to lodge in the F1 grid one day. This has hopefully sparked in your head the question of who would be F1 team's third drivers, and if it hasn't, it has now. With the help of the man himself, DylanJamesGP, of whom you should definitely subscribe to, link is in my bio, I'm not being told to say this at gunpoint, we've come up with 10 drivers who should possibly drive for teams as third drivers, just because why not? Starting at the very bottom with Williams, I'm going for Jack Aitken. I made a video about this guy about a month ago, and I believe he has great potential as a Formula 1 driver. He may not have $1 billion in his dad's wallet, but he certainly has talent, and alongside Latifi and Russell, he could learn a lot.
For Alfa Romeo, I would run Callum Ilott as the third driver. After a couple strong F2 seasons, I believe that he deserves that seat in F1. For Haas, I'd run Louis Delatraz. For me, this was close between Pietro Fittipaldi and Delatraz, however, I'd run Delatraz due to his consistently decent F2 performances. And, well, although Pietro has had experience in the car, I think Delatraz would be a better bet.
The Red Bull B team. My choice for this is going to surprise you a lot, because alongside Gasly and Tsunoda, I'm picking Naoki Yamamoto. Now I'm probably going to make a video about him in the future, but he has an imperial ton of talent, and I believe deserves an F1 seat. Again, I'll make a video about this at some point, so stay tuned for that. I want you to go back to the 2019 Japanese Grand Prix, when Naoki drove in Pierre Gasly's car for FP1. After just an hour and a half in a Formula 1 car, he was less than a tenth off experienced teammate Danny Kvyat, which is quite impressive if you ask me. Obviously there are some great talents in the Red Bull Junior Academy, such as Jehan Daruvala, Yuri Vips, Dennis Hauger, Liam Lawson, Ayumi Iwasa, Jack Crawford, Johnny Edgar, and there is of course Kvyat himself, but I think Yamamoto would be a great fit in that AlphaTauri.
In Racing Point, I'd have Stoffel Van Dorn as the third driver. Van Dorn is fast, and unfortunately didn't get to prove that in the 2018 McLaren. However, I believe he would do well. This was very, very close between Van Dorn and Hulkenberg, but I just personally think Van Dorn's got longer left of his career. For McLaren, I'd put Nick de Vries. I know that he's essentially a Mercedes junior now, however with his 2019 F2 campaign, you can't go wrong. Where he was previously a McLaren junior, I think that would work quite well.
So again, someone who you may not think of straight away, for Ferrari I'm going for Antonio Fuoco. This guy is Ferrari's current reserve driver, or one of however many they have, and he's shown some strong performances in series such as F2 before. Unfortunately, this guy ended up like Callum Ilott, missing out on F1 due to money in the wrong place at the wrong time. In the Red Bull, I have to go Alex Albon. Now this may be because I'm a bit of an Albon fan, but I think he does deserve another chance in the Red Bull. He did show some good performances in 2020, when he wasn't in the barrier, which was a substantial amount of the season, so although I don't think he deserves the Red Bull seat over Perez, if there were 3 cars, he would deserve the number 3 in my opinion.
For Merck, I'd have to put Mahavir Raghunathan. His performance in the 2019 F2 Championship was just sublime and... Wait, sorry, I've been told I'm reading the wrong script. For Merck, I'd obviously go Russell. There's just no two ways about it.
That is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, although that's only if you want to. And make sure to check out Dylan's channel as well. Make sure to follow me on social medias, and with that, I'll see you later.